coming to you from the trendy city of board gaming, Omaha, Nebraska. Welcome to the Out of the Dust podcast. I'm your host, Bryce. Tied into the popular recurring Out of the Dust geek list on Board Game Geek, the Out of the Dust podcast is a bi-weekly podcast that is focused on re-exploring games we play that we hadn't previously played in a year or more. Why did the game get dusty? Why did you decide to dust it off? How does the game compare to how you remembered it? Are you likely to play it more often in the future? These are the questions that we're interested in examining on Out of the Dust. This week on the podcast, episode 53. On the Out of the Dust segment, I'll bring Crokinole out of the dust, and a contributor will dust off innovation, echoes of the past. On the reaction segment, I talk about my time at Nuke-Con. On the What I've Been Playing segment, I review Letter Jam. On the Obscure Bryce game segment, I review Promenade. And we wrap up the episode by beginning my top 5 games of 2009 countdown. I had a chance to bring Crokinole, the classic disc-flicking dexterity game, out of the dust when my new Rosewood Mayday board shipped from the company's most recent Kickstarter. I last played it 2 years, 1 month, and 1 day ago when my friend Peter received his Mayday board and taught the game at one of his game days at his house. It was my favorite new to be of the month then, and I promised myself I'd back the next Mayday Kickstarter that came around. I was pleased at the quick turnaround Mayday did on this most recent Crokinole board Kickstarter. I was enjoying my copy a mere few months later. Some of their earlier boards had some production issues, not the least of which was the pegs fitting too loosely in their holes, but it appears that they figured out the issue this time around because there were no widespread issues reported. My board had a little nick across the surface, but Mayday swapped it out with a replacement board quickly and painlessly, and the new board is flawless. My wife and kids had not played before, so that was fun teaching them, and they have all enjoyed the game too. With 4 in our family, we have the perfect number for team play. My 5 and 10-year-old son have taken to the game very quickly and have become very competitive at the game. My 10-year-old wins quite often, in fact, and I think I can safely say there is no chance Crokinole will get dusty again in the near future. Let's see what a contributor brought out of the dust. Marco Castellanos, username Boxer Santoros, brought Innovation Echoes of the Past out of the dust. Innovation Echoes of the Past is a civilization-building card game and 2011 Asmodee release from designer Karl Chudyk of Glory to Rome fame. Echoes of the Past is the first expansion for Innovation, and like Dominion Intrigue, works as both an expansion or a standalone game. Marco last played it 2 years, 2 months, and 6 days ago. He writes, "After trying Innovation, my friend picked up the Echoes and Figures expansion. He liked Figures more, while Echoes fell by the wayside. After picking up the Deluxe Edition and working up to it, I finally got to introduce Echoes. I like Innovation a lot, but I feel it needs at least one expansion." Thanks for the contribution, Marco. I agree with your assessment. An expansion or 2 mixed in with Innovation creates a nice variety of point cards and introduces some unexpected and interesting card combos. Reaction segment time. This week on the segment, I'm going to tell you about the fun time I had at Nuke-Con last weekend, which is one of Omaha's local board game conventions. My wife was able to attend all 3 days with me, which was an unusual treat. Friday at the con, I hosted my traditional Feld Friday Marathon, which is 4 back-to-back Stefan Feld games, an event I look forward to the whole year. This year, I started things off with Merlin, with both the Arthur and Knights of the Round Table expansions. I hadn't had a chance to play with the variable player powers yet, and they worked out well for all the players. Then I thought it would be fun to feature all of Feld's 2013 games with sessions of Amerigo, Bruges, and Rialto. I underestimated how long both Merlin and Amerigo would take, and only managed to get in partial games of those, but they were still fun and tweaked my interest in getting them to the table again soon. Bruges is my #1 all-time favorite game, so of course I love that, and won a very satisfying victory in a super close game where only 4 points separated first from last. Rialto was one of the all-time magical 5-player games, and I managed to get a full complement for that one, which was glorious. It's a briskly paced game and was a perfect choice to finish off the first evening with. On Saturday, we started things off with a session of Caverna with the Forgotten Folk expansion. I was hoping to replicate my epic 7-player game from several years ago, but wound up with just a few players this time. It was a rewarding experience, though, and I managed to win thanks to a generous helping of in-game points I was able to accumulate. Next up was the only game we joined that someone else was hosting, a session of Trogdor! Hosted by my friend Jess. We had 4 players for that one and managed a surprisingly easy victory in which we didn't lose a single health. Then I hosted a session of Spellbound, the cooperative deck-building game from the Lamont brothers. This is one of my favorite convention games because it's so gorgeously overproduced that it's fun to show off both to players and random passerby who inevitably stop and wonder, what this amazing looking game is. This is one of the toughest cooperative games out there, and we came tantalizingly close to a win if we'd only managed to hang on for just one more round. Next up was a session of Lords of Waterdeep with the Scoundrels of Skullport expansion, which is one of my wife's favorite games. We had 5 players for that one, and I finished a distant last, being too greedy about taking corruption and not fulfilling my Lord's objectives as well as other players. Then I hosted a session of Dinogenics, which was another game that attracted a lot of admiration from passerby. I have to host at least one dinosaur game at any convention I attend. We finished up the evening with a session of Deluxe Edition Copenhagen, which had a full complement of players signed up for, but only one alternate show up. That was unusual because I had a lot of success with players signing up and showing up otherwise throughout the entire weekend. I even had alternates signed up for many of my events, but rarely needed them. In any event, Copenhagen was another good fit for a closer at the end of a convention day. I broke out all the queenies for it, and we had lots of special ability options. Sunday was a short day, and all I wound up playing was Pitch Car. This is another great convention game, and I set up an epic track with the intention of hosting one scheduled game of it, and then leaving it set up for other people to play as they desired. The scheduled game was a full 8 players who wound up playing twice, the second time in reverse turn order from the first game, and going through the track in reverse, which had some challenging portions in that direction. Pitch Car is always a blast, and after the scheduled game, I played with my kids a couple of times too. I like to bring them to local cons on Sunday for Pitch Car and to help man the Spielbound booth as volunteers, so they could show off some of the family games the cafe features. We didn't stay as late as usual, though, because they were tired and crazy after spending the previous 2 nights at their grandpa's house where they have difficulty falling asleep because of the exciting novelty of the experience. So Pitch Car wound up being the bookend at the close of the con, which was another fun and fulfilling experience. I also did a little bit of shopping there. I got the Return of Con expansion from a discount booth for $13, in the hopes of bringing Star Trek Frontiers out of the dust soon. I also cashed in the con bucks I earned for hosting and playing events for the new Godzilla card game, an expandable card game from publisher Bandai that will probably be a feature in the What I've Been Playing segment in a future episode. This week on the What I've Been Playing segment, I'm going to tell you about Letter Jam, the new cooperative word deduction game from designer Andra Skolpe and publisher CGE. CEG has been on a roll with this line of casual party games they've been coming out with ever since Codenames, and it looks like they might have another hit on their hands with Letter Jam. My friend Warren brought it back from Gen Con, and we played it together on multiple occasions now. Here's how it works. At the beginning of the game, each player is dealt 5 letter cards, from which they make a secret word, write it down, and then pass the cards to the player on their left, who shuffles them in a face-down stack and puts the top card on a stand facing away from them. Then, simultaneously, each player looks at the revealed cards that they can see, everyone's but their own, plus a few neutral letters that everyone can see, and announces how long of a word they can make using how many of other players' letters. Players agree as a group who will make the word after these announcements, and then that player assigns a number token to each letter, repeating the same letter with multiple number tokens if needed. Then each other player tries to figure out the word, and what their assigned letter might be by filling in the blank or blanks with logical possibilities. When a player is confident they have deduced what their current revealed letter is, which might take more than one word to accomplish, they put that letter face down in a deduce stack and reveal their next one to take its place. Players have a certain number of rounds to figure out all of their letters. If all players have done that before all the round counters are gone, and there are some ways to add additional rounds, then everyone anagrams the letters that they have deduced into a word. If everyone is able to do that, then the deduced letters are revealed, and if everyone deduced correctly, everyone wins. There's a very weird, convoluted scoring system that very few people seem to have figured out, and no one I know actually uses, to determine their final score and level of victory. But honestly, the game is challenging enough that everyone I know just chalks the game up as a straight-up victory or loss and doesn't worry about the degree of victory, because the game is challenging. Getting every single letter deduced correctly is a challenging feat in its own right. There have even been times when we've managed to do that, but one or more players were unable to anagram a word out of them. You don't actually need to anagram the same word the original player with the letters made. Any valid real word will do, but anagramming is tough, and sometimes those letters just don't fall into any legitimate order. It's an addicting game, and so far every time I've played, we've played at least a couple of times in a row. A 33% win percentage keeps me coming back for more. I'm not a fan of deduction games in general, but this one works for me. The deduction is straightforward and not gimmicky, and I really dig the word game spin on things, a genre of games I do generally like. This does seem to be a game that works best and is most satisfying with a larger number of players, so it's probably not a game I'm going to rush out and add to my own collection, but it is a game I won't turn down as a filler or closer amongst a night of meteor games. Obscure Bryce game segment time. This week I'm going to tell you about Promenade, a new Impressionism art-themed deck-building game from designer Tatawu, a Taiwanese designer with about 3 dozen games to his credit, the most well-known one of which is probably Cat Rescue, a super cute cooperative family game. Promenade started out as a Kickstarter campaign earlier this year. The theme is what caught my eye. I'm always on the lookout for underrepresented themes, and while art is a rare enough theme in its own right, the specific emphasis on Impressionism really makes Promenade stand out for me. Impressionism is my favorite kind of art, so it was an easy decision to back. The Kickstarter actually failed to fund, probably mostly due to a lack of marketing. It's always tough for games from Asia to catch on in the rest of the world. But then the designer launched a second campaign for the game, this one a limited edition, marketed to backers of the original campaign. The second campaign had only a week funding length, and a specifically small number of backers targeted enabled the designer to do a smaller print run locally with a remarkable 3-month turnaround time from funding to fulfillment. That's an unusual path for a game to see the light of day, but it seems to have worked in the case of this one. It was a fun campaign to be a part of because it was clear the designer had a lot of personal passion for the project. So anyway, it wasn't long before I was enjoying my copy. Here's how it works. Players are art dealers trying to amass the most prestigious collection of Impressionist art. They do this by manipulating the market value of the various categories of paintings and earning points for doing so. On their turn, Martin Wallace style, players take 2 actions from a menu of 3 action options. Taking the same action twice is allowable. Action option number 1 is to discard a card to draw 2 new cards from the player's deck, and is used only occasionally during the course of the game to try to draw up more valuable cards to perform one of the other actions with. Action option number 2 is purchasing a painting from one of the 4 galleries, the cost of which depends on the gallery the painting is displayed in. When a gallery is depleted of paintings, the price for that gallery goes up. These paintings are acquired using gold cards and, interestingly, other painting cards, which also increase in value during the course of the game, the more the matching category type is purchased. Action option number 3 is to display a purchased painting in the museum. Players did this by paying a display cost, which depends on the wing of the museum the painting is to be hung in, using gold and painting cards like purchasing a painting, except the cost to display a painting in the museum is generally more expensive. Doing so, however, grants a player a nice pile of in-game victory points and potential access to end-game scoring objective cards, one of which is assigned to each wing of the museum during setup and becomes unlocked if that wing is filled up with paintings during the course of the game. Category cubes are assigned to each slot of the museum during setup, and players must display a painting of the matching type to earn the in-game points. The game end triggers when a certain number of paintings have been displayed in the museum. Then, a point value is assigned to each category of paintings based on how high in monetary value the category attained during the course of the game. A similar formula applies to the gold cards a player acquired as well. Players then simply multiply the quantity of each category of cards they have in their deck at the end of the game by the end-game value for that category, add them all together, and add that total to their in-game points to reach their final score. While a player can accumulate a fair number of in-game points, they earn even more end-game points, which keeps the end results of the game up in the air and uncertain, which is a desirable thing for a deck builder to accomplish. A generous supply of mini-module adds further point-scoring opportunities and adds a lot of variability to the game. I've been quite pleased with my plays of the game so far. It's an elegant system. The deck building is straightforward, but the combination of this mechanic with commodity speculation is both refreshing and brilliant. Because every card a player adds to their deck has both immediate monetary value, gains in monetary value throughout the game, and has endgame point value, this is one of those games where a player experiences a high sensation of power and feels like they have great control over the course of their destiny. That's unusual for a game with this kind of theme, and yet the game manages to grant a pleasant experience at the same time as this rush of power during play because of the theme. Promenade is a delightful game, and I'm glad I took a chance on it. I've already demoed it at Spielbound, Omaha's local board game cafe,